You're driving home at night, nothing unusual. Then suddenly you see orange cones, floodlights, federal agents standing beside SUVs with green stripes. You slow down. An agent steps up to your window and says, "Citizenship." You answer. Then comes the next question. "Mind if we take a quick look inside the vehicle?" Now your heart rate changes because this isn't a normal traffic stop. You're nowhere near an actual border crossing. You haven't committed a crime, but somehow it suddenly feels like your normal constitutional protections just disappeared. What do you do? Can they legally stop you without suspicion? Can they search your car? Do you have to answer questions? And what happens if you say the wrong thing? Most people don't know their rights until it's too late. If you want to stay one step ahead and never get caught off guard, hit subscribe now. And if this opened your eyes, share it with someone and tell me your thoughts in the comments. Most Americans have no idea that nearly two-thirds of the US population lives inside what's called the 100-mile border zone. That area gives federal authorities expanded powers near international borders and coastlines. But expanded powers does not mean unlimited powers. And that misunderstanding gets people into trouble every single day. Because one nervous sentence, one unnecessary explanation, or one moment of consent can completely change the legal situation. In this video, we're breaking down what Border Patrol officers can legally do at checkpoints, what they still cannot do, the biggest mistakes drivers make, and the exact phrases that help protect your rights without escalating the stop. First, understand the biggest misconception. A lot of people think Border Patrol checkpoints are automatically illegal because there's no individualized suspicion. That's not exactly true. Federal courts have allowed limited immigration checkpoints near borders for brief questioning related to citizenship and immigration status. That means agents can usually stop vehicles at fixed checkpoints and ask basic immigration questions without needing probable cause or reasonable suspicion first. But here's the part people miss. That does not automatically give them unlimited authority to search your vehicle, prolong the detention, or interrogate you endlessly. The checkpoint exception is narrow. Very narrow, and officers often rely on confusion, nervousness, or voluntary consent to expand the encounter. That leads directly to mistake number one, talking too much. Agent says, "Where are you headed tonight?" Driver answers with a 5-minute explanation. Now the officer is listening for inconsistencies, nervous speech, contradictions, anything unusual. People think they can talk their way out of suspicion. Usually, they talk themselves deeper into it. At a checkpoint, you generally may be required to answer limited questions related to citizenship or immigration status, but many drivers keep volunteering extra details that have nothing to do with immigration enforcement. That's where problems start. A calmer response sounds more like this: U.S. citizen. Short, clear, complete. If the questioning starts drifting far beyond immigration issues, that's when many attorneys recommend keeping your answers minimal and calm. And if the encounter becomes prolonged, one of the most important phrases is, "Am I free to go?" or "Am I being detained?" That sentence matters because it forces legal clarity. You're not arguing, you're not resisting, you're asking whether the government believes it has legal authority to continue holding you. And that distinction becomes very important later if the stop is challenged in court. Now let's talk about the biggest trap at checkpoints: consent searches. This is where countless drivers accidentally surrender protections they still had. Agent says, "You don't mind if we take a quick look, right?" Notice the wording. It sounds casual, informal, almost friendly. But legally, consent changes everything. Because if you voluntarily allow the search, many Fourth Amendment objections become much harder to raise later. That's why rights educators constantly repeat this phrase: "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Not aggressive, not emotional, just clear. And every part of that sentence matters. Officer keeps the tone respectful. "I do not consent" clearly denies permission. "Any searches" removes ambiguity. Now here's the critical part people misunderstand. Refusing consent does not physically stop officers from searching if they claim legal authority another way. They may still search based on probable cause, a canine alert, visible evidence, or other claimed exceptions. But your refusal still matters enormously because you are preserving your legal position. You are not volunteering away your rights. Now, another major mistake people make is trying to debate constitutional law on the roadside. That almost never helps. Drivers start saying things like, "You're violating my rights. You need a warrant. I know the Constitution." Meanwhile, tensions rise, voices get louder, the stop lasts longer. Roadside is not court. The goal is not to win an argument beside the highway. The goal is to get through the encounter safely while protecting your legal position as much as possible. That's why calm language works better than emotional language. For example, "I am not resisting, but I do not consent." This phrase does two things at once. It shows non-compliance with the search request legally, but compliance physically. That distinction is huge because physical resistance can escalate the situation immediately, even if you believe the search is unlawful. Never physically interfere with officers during a search. Never grab objects. Never block doors. Never make sudden movements. If you believe your rights were violated, the safer place to challenge that is later through legal channels, not during the encounter itself. Now, let's discuss detention length. Border Patrol checkpoints are supposed to involve brief immigration-related questioning, but many stops become fishing expeditions. Agents continue asking questions unrelated to immigration. They ask about travel plans, luggage, cash, drugs, weapons, friends, employment. Some people think silence automatically makes them look guilty. Legally, silence alone generally is not enough to establish criminal wrongdoing, but how you exercise silence matters. Screaming, "I know my rights," usually escalates things. A calmer approach sounds more like this: "I choose to remain silent," or "I would like to speak to a lawyer." Simple, direct, professional. These phrases matter because they clearly invoke constitutional protections instead of leaving officers guessing. And remember something important. Many people accidentally waive rights because they keep talking after invoking them. They say, "I want a lawyer, but honestly, I was only driving down there because..." That defeats the purpose. Once you invoke your right to remain silent or request counsel, stop volunteering information. Now let's address canine units, because this area creates massive confusion. People often believe officers can always walk a drug dog around the vehicle automatically. The reality is more complicated and fact-specific. Courts have often allowed canine sniffs during lawful stops under certain conditions, but extending a stop unnecessarily just to wait for a dog could raise legal issues depending on the circumstances and timing. That's why the duration of the detention matters. Again, this is where calm repetition helps. Am I free to leave? Not once. Calmly. Periodically. You are creating a clear record that you are questioning continued detention without becoming confrontational. Now, another huge mistake is trying to act overly clever. Some people think they should outsmart officers with sarcasm or internet lawyer tricks. That can backfire fast. Border encounters already involved heightened tension and federal authority. Aggressive behavior, rapid movements, or hostility can dramatically increase risk. Stay calm, hands visible, movement slow, voice steady, even if you believe the stop is unfair, especially then. Now, there's another critical distinction people need to understand. Citizens and non-citizens may face very different legal realities during immigration questioning. The law in this area is extremely complex and highly fact-specific. State laws also vary, court rulings evolve, and the legality of any detention or search often depends on precise details that may not be obvious in a short video. That's why this is educational information, not personal legal advice. But regardless of jurisdiction, the safest overall framework stays surprisingly consistent. Comply with lawful commands. Do not physically resist. Do not volunteer unnecessary information. Do not consent to searches unless you genuinely want to. Ask whether you are free to leave. Invoke silence clearly if needed. Request a lawyer if questioning becomes serious. And above all, remember this. Most roadside encounters are won or lost emotionally before they are won or lost legally. People panic, they over-explain, they argue, they consent under pressure, they make sudden movements, they try to prove innocence instead of protecting rights. That's exactly what officers are trained to observe. The drivers who handle these encounters best are usually the calmest ones. Short answers, no sudden motions, no roadside speeches, no unnecessary consent, just controlled communication. Because near a border checkpoint, the rules may change slightly, but your rights do not completely disappear.
And knowing the difference could save you hours of detention, a vehicle search, or a situation that escalated far beyond what it needed to become. Stay calm, stay respectful, stay quiet when necessary. And in the next video, we're breaking down another situation most drivers misunderstand completely. What actually happens when an officer says, "Step out of the vehicle," and whether refusing that command can turn a routine stop into an arrest in seconds.